Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. I am so pleased to see those here joining us in person and welcome those who are joining us virtually to the Economic Club of Indiana. We are the place to be challenged by leading speakers and advance great ideas collectively. And I want to thank you all for being part of it. My name is Claire Fidian Green. I'm president and CEO of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. I'm the past president of the Economic Club of Indiana and very honored to step in for Kathy Langham today to serve as your moderator for this lunch. If you haven't already, please make sure you check in by scanning the QR code at your table. And before I introduce the president's table, I would like to take a moment to thank this season's presenting sponsor, One America. Please join me in a big round of applause to show our appreciation for their support. Let's also take a moment to thank all of our platinum sponsors for the season, right behind me here. You will notice that some of these banners behind me are outlined in gold. These flags designate organizations that have been sponsors for at least 10 years, and we do have a couple of new companies joining that group this year. Thank you for your strong support. Last season, many of our luncheons were the top trending events on Twitter. Let's keep it going today and expand that through social media. If you haven't already, take out your phones or other devices now, and you can post, tweet, or like us so that all of your colleagues and friends will know that you're involved with the Economic Club of Indiana. Our Twitter handle is @EconomicClubIN and can be found on your table. And we're already tweeting using the hashtag EconLunch, so please join in. I'm thrilled to introduce today's luncheon speaker, President and CEO of the National Urban League, Marc Morial. He leads the nation's largest historic civil rights and urban advocacy organization, which has been delivering on its mission to help underserved communities achieve their highest true social parity, economic self-reliance, power, and civil rights. Prior to this role, Morial served as mayor of New Orleans from 1994 to 2002, leading the city's renaissance with crime reduction, police reform, and the passing of a significant bond issue, which left a lasting impression, as he left the office with a 70% approval rating. And I understand if there had been a way to put him into state statute, he would have been permanent. In 1992, Morial served 2 years in the Louisiana State Senate, where he was recognized as Legislative Rookie of the Year. Since taking the helm of the National Urban League in 2003, Morial has worked to re-energize the League's diverse constituencies, to build on the strength of its nearly 100-year-old legacy, and to increase its profile both locally and nationally. Please join me in welcoming Marc Morial.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First, the last time I stood at this podium in this room was in 2019, in July, as we closed out the National Urban League Annual Conference here in the city of Indianapolis. And if you'll know, that was the last time the Urban League movement met in person, because since then we've been meeting virtually and through Zoom and other ways. So I want to thank this community once again. I want to thank Tony Mason once again for hosting us 2.5 years ago, 2 and a few months ago, where we had 19,140 people present at that conference. So give yourselves a warm round of applause. We had a wonderful time. Let me thank Claire and Ann and Ronnie and Tony and Willis, all of you who have facilitated in some way or another our visit to Indianapolis today. Let me also lift up Claire Robin and the Lilly Endowment team for their commitment and partnership, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let me offer these observations. And we live in a time of great challenge. And we shouldn't pretend that it's not a time of great challenge. I reflected recently on the fact that And it happened in association with my 22nd wedding anniversary. We were married on 9/11, 1999. And I reflected that we were now 1/5 of the way into the 21st century. 1/5, 20 years into not only a new century, but a new millennium. And I reflected, and I invite you to do, how the world we live in, the nation we live in, how multiple chapters in history have been written and rewritten in the last 20 years. We enjoyed an obsession in fall of 1999. Things seemed to be going so well in the nation that we obsessed about Y2K. We had this obsession that all of a sudden our computers would go haywire, our elevators wouldn't work, our payrolls wouldn't be processed. And when we look back on that, I'll tell you my story is I was leading the city of New Orleans. We spent $3 to $5 million on consultants. I'm still trying to figure out what those consultants did for that $3 to $5 million. They'll tell you, well, nothing happened. And nothing did happen. But how, in many respects, trivial that obsession seems today in 2021, given the magnitude of the challenges we face. 2000, we had an election which was contested. We had the controversy of hanging chads. We had the controversy of pregnant chads. You all remember the recount in Florida and ultimately the Supreme Court. But we didn't have a sense that democracy was at stake or being threatened. Just a bit over a year later, if you will, not quite a year later, we had the tragedy of the attack on the towers and the Pentagon. And it was remarkable at that moment to see how this nation rallied in the face of that crisis. That the nation, even for a moment, set aside political and philosophical and racial and gender and sectional concerns to rally given the sense of how the nation was attacked. As the century evolved, we found ourselves engaged in two very expensive, long-running wars. In Iraq and Afghanistan, we went through the tragedy of Hurricane Katrina. The nation made history in 2008 and elected its first African-American president, while at the same time, we were navigating through one of the most difficult economic times since the Great Depression, called the Great Recession. But not once did it appear that democracy or the future of the nation was at stake, because people, to a great extent, did rally to fight these challenges that we face. And as things evolved, there was Superstorm Sandy, and a change in political direction in 2016 with that election. And we landed and descended up on 2020. And all of a sudden in 2020, we were rocked by this almost invisible force, called COVID-19 that placed our health at risk, required the most radical adjustments in modern times to how we operated, worked, and played. And also a pandemic, which, ladies and gentlemen, at this very moment, we've exceeded 700,000 deaths. To some people, it's a statistic and a number. For many, it is a friend or family member. That's 700,000. What does that number represent? Not Pearl Harbor, not World War I, not World War II, not Vietnam. Not all of them combined with, if you will, 9/11 equate to that number, which is the most Americans to die in because of a single event other than the Civil War. at notwithstanding this invisible, powerful threat, which is national and international and global in its dimensions, we're fighting over it. We're battling over it. We're not debating it and discussing it. We're fighting and battling over what to do and how to do it. And it is a challenging thing. What would have occurred if we had had the same kind of battle after 9/11? That is what we faced. 2020 brought us this pandemic. Now, with a marvel of medical science, the scientists in this country were able to develop a weapon and a tool which customarily takes 5 to 7 years, and they did it in less than a year. And that marvel has created a weapon, not a perfect weapon, not an exact weapon, but a weapon to try to make us all safe. And we're fighting over whether we should take the weapon, use the weapon. When you and I went to school, we were vaccinated for measles, mumps, rubella, and polio. I remember the third grade classmate of mine who had polio. But we're fighting and we're battling. 2020 brought us not only that, but what that wrought, which was layoffs and people losing their jobs and economic anxieties. And then we all witnessed the horror of May of 2020 when George Floyd was killed on the streets of Minneapolis. But our ability to learn the truth, was enabled by what? Two things: the courage of a 15-year-old girl and a piece of technology created in 2007, an Apple iPhone. Without that young girl's courage, young lady's courage, without this incredible piece of technology, we would never, to this day, agree on the truth, because we would have been debating and discussing, and we would have heard 35 different versions of the story. But that moment, again, placed a great challenge on this nation. And the uprising and the awakening on racial justice began at that moment, the new 21st century uprising. We're at a crossroads. And that crossroads goes beyond politics. It exceeds race and gender and identity. It is a crossroads and a challenge for a generation of Americans, an entire generation of Americans. Will democracy survive? Can we become a more equitable nation while we become a more diverse nation? Can we sustain our economic standing in a far more competitive global landscape with the rise of nations like China and others? We are being challenged. The enemy of what we are facing is if people like you and I in this room, who occupy positions of civic, business, political, civil rights, and education leadership, become comfortable and complacent and become possessive of the attitude, I have made it. I have made it. And I worked hard and I hustled, and if everybody would just do as I do, they'd be okay too. That's exactly a formula for the decline of this great nation. So much sits in the hands of this generation of leaders to recognize these are great and monumental challenges, whether it is racial justice, whether it is the fact that too many Americans, and particularly too many Americans of color, pay too much for just keeping the roof over their head, or that we, for the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in modern American history, last year saw a reduction in life expectancies for white Americans, Black Americans, and Latino Americans. So the context of these times is that great challenge. And I don't think anyone should feel overwhelmed by that great challenge. I don't think anyone should feel that the challenge is beyond the ability of this nation or our communities to be able to confront it and navigate it. Why do I say that? Look at the 20th century and look at what happened in the 20th century. When the 20th century began, people still used outhouses. Wealthy people rode horses, and the average person walked wherever they had to go. There were no heaters and air conditioners and dishwashers and microphones and airplanes and automobiles. Life expectancy for most Americans was 15 to 20 years less than it is today. So you had a technological revolution in the 20th century. You had a revolution in the 20th century of equity, as women got the right to vote, as de jure segregation was toppled all throughout the South. And you had a revolution of democracy, where the nation, this nation, with its allies, put down one of the greatest threats to the system of democracy in modern times, that being Adolf Hitler and Japanese aggression in Asia. In the 20th century, those folks that lived and struggled, they didn't make it perfect. They didn't solve all the problems, and they left much work to be done. But they moved the needle and the dial on multiple fronts. On multiple fronts. And would it be for us to have to stare our children and grandchildren in the eyes and say, you know, on our watch, we went backwards. We had income inequality. We left a racial justice work that we had an opportunity to make progress on undone. We allowed technology to be controlled and be in the hands of some. This is what we must face. And this is beyond red and blue politics, and it's beyond that. Because it's about what are the challenges we face and can we confront them and deal with them. So in Indianapolis, in this city, today, right now, there is a great opportunity in front of us. That opportunity is the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative that has been seed funded. Thank you, Lillian Dowman, give them a hand for seed funding this. But I don't view it as funding, I view it as a challenge. I view it as a challenge, and I view it as an Indianapolis-based institution that's committed to this city and this state saying, we see a big problem, and we are determined to do something about it. So they've challenged us at the National Urban League, the Indianapolis Urban League, the Indianapolis Black Coalition. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to challenge you. Because that commitment, while significant, doesn't go far enough. That commitment, while significant, does not ensure sustainable outcomes. So my challenge is to every business, civic, and political leader in this city and in this region to join hands and ask, how can I support with my time, my talent, and yes, my treasure, this effort to transform the fortunes of Black Indianapolis. The home ownership rate between Blacks and whites in this city is wider than the national average. The joblessness rate between whites and Blacks compared in this city is greater than the national average. The legacy in this city of the middle 20th century destruction of what was called Indianapolis Harlem must be understood to understand why a significant portion of Black wealth that existed in the 1930s and 40s with clubs and businesses was destroyed, and how in the 21st century some wrongs get righted. This is where this city is. There will be eyes on the city and eyes on the region. And this city is a perfect opportunity to stand up an initiative like this if all of the players come to the table. So the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative, I'm going to say to you, is not a spectator sport. It's not the kind of thing where everyone should just sit on the side and say, let's see what they do. Let's just fold our arms. Heck, I got a front row seat. Let's see what they do. Let's see how it evolves. Let's see if they can meet the match. Versus saying this initiative can make a difference for overall Indianapolis. But it also can demonstrate to other communities across the nation that investments may be anchored by major foundations or major philanthropists when combined with community and business collaboration can really make a difference in the lives of people. And that is what this is indeed all about. So I challenge all of you to work with us, to stand with Tony and Willis and the entire team, and to ask, what can we bring to the table? How can we align our work? How can we channel our philanthropy? We can channel our resources to make a difference over the next 5 to 7 years, so that 5 years from now, this city's business, civic, community, and faith leaders can truly say, we started something, we made a difference, we moved the dial, we turned the corner on a community that had been for too long locked out and left out of Indianapolis and left out of Indiana. Now, I think that at this juncture, this opportunity gives each of you and gives each of us an opportunity to be somewhat introspective and ask the question, can I do more and what will I do? And I want to encourage from the business community to faith leaders. I'm going to underscore faith leaders, and I don't mean just African-American preachers. I mean faith leaders of all denominations and races, to put their moral voice behind this is about equity. We do have a portion of our community that has been locked out and left out. And we want to assist them because a rising tide will lift more boats. And to eliminate or reduce poverty in this country generates economic activity for all. So today, I want to thank the Economic Club of Indiana. And I want all of us to recognize where we sit and where we stand at this moment in history, where we are as we look ahead and as we look back. It's truly an American crossroads. We have to protect this system of democracy, the ability of people to vote. We have to protect and honor truth in the public square, differences in debate, Differences of opinion based on facts are part of the American tradition. But creating alternative sets of facts about things is what gets done in totalitarian regimes. Old Soviet Union had what they call the TASS news agency. And the TASS news agency was the only news agency allowed. And they just pumped out a steady diet of propaganda, false facts, and false information. It was part of the way that the country was managed, that we have to control the way people think, even if it requires lying and false facts. We have to protect democracy. We have to protect truth and the ability to debate the facts, yes, but not change and alter the facts, because that is what happens in totalitarian regimes. And for us to remain and continue and thrive as a strong democracy, we have to make sure everyone is included. Everyone has a seat at the table. Everyone participates in decision-making, participates in voting. And we have to fight for that. We have to work for that. Beginning of the 19th century I spoke about, voters were almost exclusively white men. There were a few African-American men who voted, but the Plessy v. Ferguson case and the backlash after Reconstruction stripped that away. Women had no right to vote. Democracy was not complete. Democracy is now much fuller. Everyone having the opportunity to participate. So we got to protect democracy. We have to protect the truth. So Indianapolis, I challenge you today. I compliment the work already that has been undertaken. Tony and his team briefed us this morning. They've made a tremendous amount of progress on priority setting. I'm going to let them at the appropriate time announce what those priorities are, because I think it's the appropriate way as they finish what the priorities of this initiative will be. I know that many have said, where is the progress as of yet? They have engaged in a thorough, careful, methodical planning process. They've talked to over 1,000 people in the community. They have gone through a deliberative process to try to ensure that when they're ready to run, they're truly ready to run. And so I support that. And I told Tony this morning, told Willis this morning, if you all need to take more time to plan and get it right, let's be right. Better to be right on it than be quick on it. And make sure you have community buy-in and a solid go-forward plan. So I expect you'll hear some announcements, hopefully before the end of the year, on the priority setting, some announcements about timelines. But in between then and now, I have encouraged that we have more dialogue with leaders in this community about how they too can participate in this plan. Bring resources, bring time, bring thoughtfulness, bring assets to this plan. That is what can take this $100 million commitment and give it substantially more value, and also give it the kind of foundation that it is an initiative that lasts beyond the 5 years of this initial commitment. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. We're going to take some Q&A. Claire and I are going to talk, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you for lunch. Thank you for being such a great audience. Last time I was with the Indianapolis Economic Club, we were here in 2011, I believe it was, when we were here on a jobs tour. So always been good. I do promise you that I will root for the Indianapolis Colts in every game they play except against the New Orleans Saints. So you got me there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for
Thanks,
painting a sobering picture of where we are as a country, but then also issuing a challenge and filling us with hope. I think you are a historian, Tony Mason told me, and you have a good grasp of the 20th century, but I think, many other periods, and thinking about the challenges that our predecessors faced and how they rose to challenge is a really great challenge. So thank you for that. You mentioned that you got an update from Tony and Willis about this historic $100 million grant this morning, and you're going to wait for them to complete their planning to announce priorities. But I appreciated that you issued a challenge to the people in this room to get engaged. And part of that is on us to ask, how can we help? But if you were to give some advice now, since you have a mic and you're in front of us, what would be one thing you think that companies, universities, community leaders might do to help them really accelerate this $100 million grant?
The first step is to be in dialogue with Tony and Willis, to learn, because I think what people will see when the priorities are revealed, it's not rocket science. The challenges are well known. They're understood. It's in jobs, it's in education, it's in healthcare, it's in housing, it's in entrepreneurship and economic development. Those challenges are well known. I think the idea is that there's already energy in the community to do community work. There's already energy, but can it be more closely aligned with an overall plan? Because how community work evolves today in most communities is everybody kind of does their own thing. Everybody's inspired by a sense of what's needed. But there's no comprehensive planning, no comprehensive collaboration. And it's not to take people's independence away from them. It's to see how you add value. Sometimes collaboration is like a force multiplier. It's sometimes 2 + 2 doesn't always equal 4. You know, it's like 2 times 2 can equal more because you're adding a level of energy and a level of non-duplication sometimes to the process. So I really believe that my hope is that this creates that opportunity for people to be in dialogue and say, let's look at what we plan to do over the next 5 years. Let's see if it aligns. Let's see if we can work on some projects together. Let's see if we can jointly fund some initiatives at some organizations together. Let's really think through. And then let's also grasp on, I've also challenged Tony and Willis and the team to think about what the metrics and goals are for this project. You know, where do we want to be 5 years from now? What do we want to accomplish in that period of time? So I do encourage that level of dialogue, you know, real dialogue with them. And remember, there's many ways. There's money. There's also volunteer time. There's also what I call creating the proper atmospherics around the challenge.
Terrific. Before I get to those cards, you mentioned in your remarks the killing of George Floyd, and I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you, it's been about 15 months since that event took place and all of the protests that took place all over the country, including here in Indianapolis, and I'd love to get your thoughts of what do you think have been the positive things that have come out of all those protests a little more than a year later, and then where do we still need to dig in and do a lot more work?
Let me tell you a personal story. It's a little bit revelatory, but I'll tell it anyway because I've said it publicly. As you all know, I'm from New Orleans. What you all may not know is that every school I went to from elementary through high school, I essentially integrated the school. So my middle school, I was the first Black student of 2 to attend my middle school when I began there in the late 1960s. About 6 weeks after George Floyd took place, I got a handwritten letter. And it was a handwritten letter from a schoolmate of mine. And that schoolmate of mine wrote me an apology letter. And that apology letter apologized for what his terminology was for racially bullying you when we were in middle school. Now, I didn't really remember this particular student. It was kind of hazy, but racial bullying and what people call microaggression was a daily occurrence. in those days, but my parents taught me to be tough and resilient, and I got in a few fist fights, but worked through whatever it was. In the letter, it said, that the George Floyd incident had compelled me to re-examine who I am and who I think I am. And I realized that who I've been is not who I want to be. And it was signed by him with no return address. So I use that to illustrate that it was a wake-up call and a point of introspection for many people. It was a point of introspection and re-examination and commitment by many institutions, business institutions, academic institutions, who have made new commitments to racial justice, no doubt. So there's been that effect. On an objective front, there's also the killings of unarmed people by the police, particularly people of color, has not really abated. Numbers are not different in 2021 than they were in 2020. And while there is efforts in many local communities, I'm going to Louisville tonight, to reform policing, there's been just obstinance at the national level to pass what is really a modest law called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So we still, haven't completely reconciled the need for there to be a response. Now, 1968, 3 weeks after Martin Luther King was killed, not to compare Martin Luther King to George Floyd, but a historical context, the Congress of the United States passed the Fair Housing Act, which was a landmark civil rights act. That Congress at that time had less than 6 African-American members, maybe 3 women, yet it passed a fair housing law in 1968. To the extent that George Floyd is an equivalency, why can this particular US Senate not bring itself to have some courage, to make a statement, to make a strong statement, even after we secured, through Cory Booker, the support of 2 major police organizations? Still couldn't get the Congress of the United States, the Senate particularly, to pass such a bill. So on one front, the efforts that are underway on police reimagination, re-envisioning, and reform at the local level, there are positive signs in that. On the national front, there's still obstacles. To the extent that institutions have made commitments, there's only one question for the institutions that made commitments, and that is, will we make sure that this is a movement and not a moment? That those commitments are permanent, they're not just temporary, they're not fleeting, it's not just PR. We made a commitment, and whether things change or not, we made a commitment. So that's the challenge that we face in America, and it was a profound moment to me because the protesters at the George Floyd moment were of all races. They were spontaneous protests, they weren't organized by anybody, really. You had organizing efforts, but no one sat down and planned 6 months and said, let's protest in every city. And you also had protesting going on in big cities, small towns, not just in major urban communities. And you had every protest I went to, there were as many or more white Americans than there were Black Americans. So there's got to be a consistency, and people who see that should reflect on the fact, particularly that the young generation, the emerging generation, has no tolerance, and they are aligned with wanting to see change.
Well, that's a great lead into a question from the audience. An audience member asked about young people and their engagement in making change, which you mentioned in your remarks. And the question is, how can we make that happen? And how can you, as a leader of an organization, how can other leaders of organizations in this room
actually empower young people to
Next year, you should bring 50 young, you should be a high school student at every table at this luncheon. We have to include our young people in discussions and conversations. We have to be intentional about being role models for them. We can't get into the generational condemnation. You know, like I hear some of my friends talk about, why do these young people always want to put all these tattoos on their body? Why do they want to wear burgundy and purple hair? And I said, I am not worried about that. I don't care about that. I had a big old afro. My grandmother wanted to put me out of her house. You know, I said, we need to be concerned about what's in their head and in their heart, and minister to that rather, or speak to that and educate to that and mentor to that, than getting tied up in a lot of superficiality. And, you know, young people are always going to create their own edge on fashion and appearance, right? It's an age-old thing. You go all the way back. It happened with every generation for all of us in here. So we shouldn't be dissuaded by that, but I think it takes a great deal of intentionality. The second thing is, I think we have to try to ensure, we have to find a way in this country to make post-secondary education affordable. 100 years ago, we went through a big battle in this country over making elementary and then later secondary school mandatory and what? Free. We're at a stage now where we have to think about post-secondary education, how to make it affordable, right? How to make it available. And yes, we have to strengthen preparing people for the moment of secondary education, but we need to do that. Too many young people, I met a young woman at the Navy, Old Navy. I was shopping with my teenage daughter, and the person helping us, my daughter went in the waiting room, and I started talking to the young lady. I said, hey, tell me about yourself. Oh, I just finished high school. I said, what are you doing? You going to college? Seemed like a very together, you know, young lady. And she said, no, I wanted to go. I said, why didn't you go? She said, you know, I went over there and then they started telling me about all these loans and money. And I said, we couldn't get it together. I said, well, what are you doing? She said, well, I'm gonna go to basic training. I'm gonna join the military. She says, I don't really want to do that. But I said, well, you know, I'm glad you know, positive that you're doing something. I said, you know about ROTC? Do you know about this? You know about that? She says, you know, there was nobody in my high school to help me, you know, think through, navigate through. One of the things we have to strengthen in our high schools is the guidance, counseling function and factor. There's a lot of scholarships, there's money out here. A lot of times young people just need some help, need some guidance, need some direction. We have to figure out a way to make college and post-secondary education, which is community college, technical school, four-year college, affordable and available to more people. Our power as a nation has come from the power and the skill set and the education levels of our people. That's what makes the nation powerful and strong. Now that we have emerging communities of color, the disparities will have a weighing effect on us if we don't correct it, make college more affordable, particularly create pathways for Black and brown kids going into the future. Last thing I'm going to say, last year, look, the college enrollment numbers are now 60% women and 40% men. So you're now seeing a decline in college enrollment amongst men of all races. Now, I'm cheering the sisters. I got two daughters, but I have a son too. He's in college. But we need to think about whether this is an early warning signal. We know with Black men, the challenges that they have faced. And this is an indication that that problem is not abating. And now it's affecting men of all backgrounds. So it's important to think about what that means. And I'm celebrating the great successes of women and their academic successes and their professional successes. So I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying, but I think that, you know, if the population is 50-50 or 52-48, you'd expect that college enrollment rates would kind of match whatever the population is.
Well, I have more questions than we can ask in our remaining time. So I'm going to group together a few here because they're thematically similar. So about what's going on with our democracy. So insurrection on January 6th, there's these debates about critical race theory. It feels like we're increasingly polarized. So what are your words of advice for how we locally can take steps to try to bring people back together?
I think, honestly, people of goodwill have to band together. You know, when I saw, when I first had a glimpse of the Capitol on January 6th, I really thought I was watching a movie. I took a second take and I said, because it looked like a movie. Right? I said, no, that's not a movie. That's real. And it was jarring because I never believed that there was in this country, even though we fight and debate over elections. And then if we don't like the outcome, we go to court. We fight in court. And when the courts decide, people kind of go along, right? That's called rule of law. That something of that nature and that magnitude could happen in the United States of America. I never imagined it. I just thought it was beyond what this country certainly has been all about. That notwithstanding the fact, what followed that, and this is very trying, in the 2020 election, 70% of all Americans voted by way of a non-traditional method, which means they didn't go to the polling place on election day and cast their ballot. They voted by mail, they early voted, they absentee voted, they drive-by voted. Obviously, the changes were compelled by COVID. What did we have? Highest turnout election in American history. Fewer irregularities on election day in American history. Why? We had less people voting on election day. Now, in 40 states, there have been bills and laws proposed that are designed to take away the method by which 70% of the American people voted. Cut back on early voting, cut back on vote by mail, require you to put on an absentee ballot your driver's license number. You ever try copying those 11 numbers without making a mistake? On your driver's license on the absentee ballot, or it will be disqualified, or get 3 witnesses on your absentee ballot, or it'll be disqualified. All manner of things. 400 bills in 48 states being proposed. What gives here? You have a successful election? Is it because you just didn't like the outcome? Is that what we do when we don't like the outcome? We change the rules. We lose a basketball game and we say, you know what, next time let's make the rim 15 feet high. That way we can compete. Or let's make it so that nobody can run, everybody's got to walk. And then we can compete. We're trying to change the rules. So democracy is under some challenge right now. And how do we bring people together? I think this is about a coalition of the willing. You know, I don't think you're ever gonna have unanimous agreement on anything in this country, but it is the need for the coalition of the willing. One is civility in public discourse, which can include very sharp conversations, but with a level of civility. The other is we have to protect the right to vote. We have to protect the ballot box. We have to protect it in an unfettered way. I believe the more people who vote, the better off our democracy is, because then we have the consent of the governed. So I'll say one thing about, because this is a longer conversation. I know you wanted to get to the critical race theory question. I sort of think that the terminology of critical race theory can confuse actually what is going on. So let me use a real example So in my history book, my American history book, 4th and 5th grade, in my American history book, it said, and I quote, that Europeans came to North America to Christianize heathenous Indians who bore witness to false gods. That's what it said. What critical race theory says is that you should teach the truth and that teaching that is wrong. What critical race theory says is we need to understand that redlining was part of law and policy. So it's to understand the play of race and politics. Let me give you maybe an example. So when the framers wrote the Constitution, they never used the word slave. They never used the word enslaved. They never used the word Black. They never used the word African American. The Constitution has references. It talks about 3/5 of such other persons who are not free. Talks about enslaved people in code. So did the Constitution itself have race infused in it? One might say, no, it didn't. It didn't use the word race. But it actually did, because it had references to race. So one of the things about critical race theory is learning the fundamental truth. And it's not to be in a disparagement of the nation. If we as a nation cannot be critical of ourselves, if we cannot analyze the past and understand how it's affected the future, then I would submit to you, we are in a move towards totalitarianism, where you have to look at things the way they've been defined in the past, and we can't do any reexamination of them. So that's a few thoughts on this. I also think this is what's, I don't like the idea of state legislatures and politicians trying to write curriculum for public education. All of a sudden now the move against critical race is politicians, when typically what's taught in schools has been left mainly to public educators, trained professional people. I don't see you getting involved, state legislature, to make sure our kids understand quantum physics, or that they understand how to read and write better, or giving us reading coaches in every school. So why are you going to get involved in this instance? Maybe you ought to keep your hands off and let the educators do their job.
Well, with those words, given the number of questions, we could talk with you all day, and you have to go to Louisville. So please join me in thanking Marc for his encouraging challenge to us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone.
We really appreciate you being here. And today's presentation will be available online at economicclubofindiana.com. Next month, please join us Monday, November 8th. We welcome U.S. Senator Todd Young. And be sure to purchase your tickets today. Join us for what's going to be another great conversation. Information and tickets for each of this season's presenters can be found at economicclubofindiana.com. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, everyone.